They stole $70,000 from my credit card, and my mother laughed when I confronted her. You can't prove a thing. For years, I clung to the illusion that family meant safety, that parents loved equally. But the cracks had always been there, hidden in subtle favoritism, in the way my sister's mistakes became my debts. The night I stared at my bank statement, my hands trembled, not from the money, but from the betrayal. When they returned home, I knew this was no longer about numbers. It was about justice, dignity, and the woman I would become. The restaurant was glowing with golden light, chandeliers shimmering above tables crowded with smiling faces. Laughter rippled through the air as waiters carried in a 3-tiered cake dusted with edible glitter. It was Sophia's birthday, her 32nd, and my parents had spared no expense to make her night sparkle. My mother clasped her hands dramatically, exclaiming how our golden daughter deserved the best in the world. My father raised his glass, declaring how proud he was of her brilliance, her career, her beauty. Around the table, friends and relatives clapped, their admiration loud and unquestioning. I sat at the edge of the celebration, watching the scene unfold as though through a pane of glass. My smile was fixed, polite, practiced after years of these family gatherings. Sophia leaned into the attention, glowing under their praise. Every word they showered on her was one less word reserved for me. The distance was not new. It had always been there, woven into the fabric of our family. Tonight, though, it felt sharper, almost cruel. I sipped my water and told myself not to mind. But deep down, I wondered, had anyone ever clapped for me like that? The sound of my phone buzzing pulled me from the reverie. I slipped it from my bag, hiding it beneath the table. A new notification blinked from my banking app. Your account has been debited $70,000. My breath caught. The room spun for a second, and the glittering lights above me seemed suddenly hostile. I blinked hard, trying to process what I was seeing. It had to be a mistake, a technical glitch. I checked again. No. There it was, a single transaction gone in one breath. I looked around the table. Everyone was laughing, raising glasses, their eyes locked on Sophia as she posed with the cake. My parents beamed, their pride painted across their faces. And me? I felt invisible, small, and suddenly very, very cold. Have you ever felt like the whole room is against you? The thought slithered through my mind, an unspoken whisper to anyone watching my life from outside. Later, when the party ended and I found a moment alone, I called my bank. Their voice was calm, factual. The charge was real. A withdrawal authorized by a card linked to my account. My stomach knotted. I dialed my parents immediately, the question trembling on my lips. Mom, did you use my credit card? My voice cracked. There was a pause, then a laugh. Not soft or nervous, but sharp, dismissive. Oh, Madeline, don't be ridiculous. You probably just forgot. You always misplace things. Maybe you paid for something and didn't notice. The air drained from my lungs. I wasn't a child. I wasn't careless. But in her tone, I heard the old trick. Gaslighting, making me doubt myself. $70,000, I said quietly, forcing my voice steady. That's not something I forget. Honestly, she sighed, you should relax. Maybe it's best not to accuse people you love. The line clicked dead. I stared at the screen, my reflection pale in the dark glass. My father texted shortly after. Your mother's right. Don't create drama where there is none. We all have to help family sometimes. Help. That word twisted inside me. The next morning, as though fate wanted to mock me, Sophia posted on social media, sun-drenched photos of herself lounging in a private cabana, glasses of champagne sparkling beside her, captions about living her best life, treating herself because she deserves it. My chest tightened as I counted the photos. Luxury resorts, designer clothes, private flights, expenses that could easily total $70,000. The comments flooded in. Friends adored her. Strangers envied her. And my parents, of course, left their glowing approval beneath every photo. I felt rage rise, hot and suffocating, but underneath it was a deeper ache, the old familiar wound. They had chosen her again. chosen to believe she deserved everything while I was the one meant to pay for it, silently, invisibly. I shut my laptop, but the image of Sophia laughing in the sun stayed burned into my mind. That money wasn't just numbers in a bank account. It was years of my work, my stability, my future. And now it was gone, transformed into champagne bubbles and staged smiles. For a long time, I sat in silence, staring at the walls of my apartment. The weight pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. Part of me wanted to give in, to believe their version of the story, to let it go. That was what they always counted on, my silence, my compliance. But then another thought crept in, sharper than grief, steadier than rage. If they thought I would remain quiet, that I would play my role as the forgotten daughter, they were wrong. I whispered it into the empty room, my voice steady though no one was there to hear. If they think I'll stay silent, they're wrong. The morning after my sister's birthday, the apartment was too quiet. Sunlight cut through the blinds, striping the kitchen table where my unopened bills sat like accusations. I hadn't been able to sleep. The numbers on my phone kept flashing behind my eyelids. $70,000. Gone. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a glitch. Banks make errors all the time, don't they? I tore open an envelope and felt my stomach twist. It was a contract, thick and stamped, with my name scrawled across the bottom. Except, it wasn't my handwriting. My signature curved differently, the loops too perfect. Someone had practiced. Someone had perfected being me. I dialed the number on the letter with shaking fingers. The customer service agent spoke in a calm, rehearsed tone, explaining that I had co-signed a luxury loan for Sophia 3 weeks ago. "No," I whispered. "I didn't sign anything." "I understand, ma'am, but this is your name, your card information, your authorization. Would you like us to send a copy?" I hung up before my voice could crack. My parents had always managed the family's finances with the air of benevolent rulers. I had trusted them. I wanted to trust them. Now I pictured my mother's elegant hand guiding a pen, my father watching in silence. My phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from social media. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There she was. Sophia, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my rent, leaning against the railing of a yacht in the Mediterranean. The caption read, "Life is short. Treat yourself. Some of us can. Some of us can't." My jaw tightened. The comments were a flood of admiration. "Queen! You deserve it, babe." Not a single person questioned where the money came from. In their story, I was the clumsy, bitter sister who could never measure up, always borrowing, always failing. Have you ever watched people rewrite your life while you're still living it? That's what it felt like. My entire body ached with the weight of a lie I didn't know how to fight. Then, as if on cue, my inbox pinged. A new message from my bank. "Notice, your account is now overdrawn." I blinked. Overdrawn? I hadn't spent a cent. My breath caught again. How deep does this go? The summons came 2 days later. My father called it a family meeting, his voice heavy with manufactured disappointment. I knew better. When the Carters held meetings, they were trials without defense attorneys. I arrived at the house I grew up in, every corner dripping with curated perfection, fresh roses in vases, silverware lined like soldiers. But the air was sharp. My parents sat on one side of the dining table, Sophia in the middle, her smile sweet as poisoned honey. "We need to talk," my mother began, fingers folded over each other. "About your irresponsibility." My pulse quickened. Irresponsibility? Father slid a folder across the polished wood. "The debts, Madeline. We had to step in for you. Again." I opened the folder, loan papers with my name forged across every line. My mouth went dry. "I never signed these." "Don't embarrass yourself," my mother said softly. "It's your handwriting. We've seen it. Why can't you just admit you made mistakes?" Her eyes locked with mine, calm, cold, certain. Cliffhanger thought, what if I really am crazy? What if I've lost track of myself? The room swirled with accusations. Words like selfish, ungrateful, burden. My sister's crocodile tears sparkled under the chandelier, and relatives shook their heads as if the verdict were already decided. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, like the world itself was conspiring to throw me down. Later that night, I wandered into the park, clutching my coat against the wind. Families sat on benches, children laughing, couples sharing coffee. I watched them and wondered, what would it feel like to be loved like that? To be defended instead of condemned? My chest ached with a loneliness I could barely name. I sank onto a bench, the cold biting through my skirt, and let myself grieve. For the girl I had been, for the sister I thought I had, for the parents who had never chosen me. My tears dried, leaving salt on my lips. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and exhaled. And then, a vibration against my thigh. My phone again. A message. It was from Rebecca, an old friend from college, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Maddie, I thought you should see this. Attached was a screenshot from a private social media group. Sophia's smiling face filled the photo, her manicured nails flashing as she held up champagne. The caption read, "Who needs a sugar daddy when you've got a sister's credit card? ATM life." The world tilted again, but differently this time. Not from fear, from clarity. Micro cliffhanger. I closed my eyes, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened, and whispered, "They have no idea what they've started." The dining room smelled of rosemary and roasted chicken, the table gleaming with crystal glasses and polished silverware. My mother had called it a peace dinner, her voice light, as though everything between us could be mended with food and forced smiles. I arrived wary, every step toward that house heavier than the last. Sophia was already there, glowing in her silk blouse, a delicate chain glittering at her neck. My father poured wine into her glass first, then my mother's, then his own. My glass remained empty until I quietly reached for the bottle myself. The gesture was small, but the humiliation was sharp. We ate in silence for a while, knives clinking against porcelain. My father finally cleared his throat. "We thought it was time to clear things up, Maddie, to put this unpleasantness behind us." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there was still a shred of fairness left, but then my mother slid a folder across the table, her manicured nails tapping it once, twice, like a judge calling order in her court. "Go on," she said. "Read it." My fingers trembled as I opened the folder. Pages of legal text blurred until I reached the bottom line, the family home. My grandparents' home, the house that had been my refuge as a child, was now officially deeded to Sophia. The words burned. "This can't be real," I whispered. "Oh, it's very real," my father replied, his voice steady, almost bored. "Your grandparents wanted the house to stay in the family. Sophia is the one best positioned to maintain it." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Grandma left it to all of us. She told me herself." My mother leaned back, lips curving in a faint smile. "Memories are tricky things, Madeline. Paper, however, does not lie." The truth hit me like a hammer. They had altered the will. The one document that had always stood as proof that I belonged, that I was wanted, had been rewritten. I could almost hear my grandmother's voice in my head, gentle and warm, promising me I would always have a place here. That promise was gone, stolen as if it had never existed. Sophia sipped her wine, her eyes glittering with quiet triumph. "It's for the best," she said softly. "You've never really fit here." Something inside me cracked. I wanted to scream, to overturn the table, to claw the smugness from their faces. But I sat frozen, numb, and hollow. My mother leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "You can't prove anything. Not a single word." She smiled faintly as though savoring the final blow. The room fell silent, but the silence screamed louder than any argument. My hands shook as I closed the folder, and for the first time, I felt something I had never let myself feel before, despair that tasted like surrender. Days blurred together after that. I went to work but couldn't concentrate. staring at my computer screen until the numbers and letters dissolved into meaningless patterns. My boss asked if I was all right. I nodded, but the lie sat heavy in my throat. I missed deadlines, forgot meetings, and for the first time in years, the word incompetent floated around my office. At night, I lay in bed replaying every moment of the dinner, the folder, the signatures, my mother's smile. Maybe they're right, I thought. Maybe I really am the problem. Maybe I've always been the problem. The weight of it pressed down until I could barely move. Food lost its taste. Laughter felt foreign. I scrolled through Sophia's endless stream of glamorous posts, the comments praising her brilliance while I shrank further into the shadows. One evening, I found myself staring at an old photograph. All of us together, my parents, Sophia, and me, sitting in front of the family house. My grandmother stood behind us, her hands on my shoulders. I looked so small, so hopeful. Tears blurred my vision as I held the photo closer. That girl believed she mattered. That girl believed promises lasted. Rage twisted with grief, and before I could stop myself, I ripped the picture down the middle. Then again, and again, until nothing remained but scraps scattered across the floor like ashes. The sound of tearing filled the empty apartment, and when it stopped, the silence was unbearable. I sank to the ground, clutching a fragment with my grandmother's faded smile. My body shook with sobs until no tears were left. The hours passed and something shifted. My eyes, swollen and dry, stared at the pieces on the floor. My chest rose and fell with the last of my ragged breaths. Then, like a candle lit in darkness, a thought flickered. This ends with me. I wiped my face with trembling hands, and in the reflection of the dark window, I no longer saw the helpless daughter. I saw a woman cornered but not defeated. The grief was still there, but under it, a pulse of determination beat steady, undeniable. The tears were gone. My eyes were dry, and for the first time in weeks, they were sharp. Cliffhanger. The reflection in the window stared back, and I whispered, "You wanted me broken, but you'll see me unbroken." I woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a hollow chest, the scraps of the torn photograph still scattered on my living room floor. For a long time, I just stared at them, numb, but something inside me refused to collapse again. I picked up the pieces one by one, placed them in an envelope, and tucked it away in a drawer. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. I would never let them erase me again. That night, instead of drowning in silence, I opened my laptop and typed, "Toxic Family Survivors." The search results felt like a lifeline. Stories poured across the screen. People who had been gaslighted, betrayed, stolen from by their own parents, siblings turned rivals, wills rewritten, finances drained. Each word I read lit another spark inside me. I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. I joined a virtual support group, and within minutes, strangers welcomed me with warmth I hadn't felt in years. They told their stories, and as I listened, I felt like someone had finally turned on a light in the room I had been stumbling through blind. Every pattern they described, favoritism, scapegoating, financial abuse, matched my life like puzzle pieces snapping into place. For the first time in weeks, my breath came steady. My rage wasn't just mine. It was shared, understood, validated. And with validation came power. Days later, while sorting through unopened envelopes on my kitchen counter, I found another contract. My hands shook as I opened it. There it was again, my forged signature. This time for a personal loan of $20,000. I hadn't even known it existed. My parents had used my name again, casually, as though I were just a tool. The betrayal cut deeper than before, but instead of collapsing, I felt the fire in my chest spread. They thought I would never check. They thought I would remain blind. But the more I uncovered, the stronger I felt. I pressed record on my phone and dialed my mother. "Mom," I said, voice calm, almost casual. "Why is there another loan in my name?" Silence, then the unmistakable sound of her laugh. Sharp, condescending, the same laugh that had haunted me after the first theft. "Oh, Madeline, you always dramatize everything. You'll be fine. You make enough money. What's 20,000 to you?" I let her talk, every cruel word captured on the recording. And when she laughed again, that mocking note clear as a bell, I ended the call, my hand steady. I had proof now. Not just papers, not just numbers. Her voice, undeniable. Cliffhanger thought. I replayed it once, just to feel the satisfaction of hearing her arrogance sealed in digital permanence. I found a lawyer the next week, a woman recommended by one of the support group members. Her office was modest, cluttered with case files, but her eyes were sharp and unflinching. I laid out the contracts, the forged signatures, the bank statements, and finally, the recording. She listened without interrupting, then leaned back in her chair. "You have a strong case," she said simply. "It won't be easy, but they've left a trail. People like this always do." Her words were steel in my veins. I began collecting everything: old emails, texts, financial records, even handwriting samples. Piece by piece, I built my case like a fortress. Each document was a brick, each recording a weapon. For once, I wasn't the victim waiting to be struck. I was preparing to strike back, not with rage, but with precision. One evening, exhausted from sorting through paperwork, I met my friend Rebecca for coffee. She listened as I explained everything, her hand resting over mine. "Shh, you're not crazy," she said firmly. "They did this to you, and you're finally taking it back." It was a simple moment, but it was the breath I didn't realize I had been holding. A pause in the storm. We laughed about old memories, stories untouched by my family's poison, and for a while I felt human again. Walking home that night, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making them suffer. It was about reclaiming myself, about ending the cycle before it consumed me completely. Justice, not vengeance. Freedom, not chains. When I returned to my apartment, I found an email waiting. It was from my lawyer. Subject: Case Review. Message: We can win this. My breath caught, not from fear this time, but from something brighter, stronger. Cliffhanger. I closed my laptop slowly, my reflection in the screen looking back with steady eyes. For the first time, I believed her. We could win. The dining room looked different this time. The candles flickered low, casting shadows that stretched across the walls like bars of a cage. My parents had called for another family dinner, but I knew better. This wasn't a dinner, it was a trial. And for once, I wasn't the one sitting defenseless. I arrived with a folder tucked beneath my arm, my hands steady though my pulse raced. Sophia smirked as I walked in, her glass already half full of wine. My mother sat poised, chin lifted in quiet superiority, while my father leaned back in his chair, a judge waiting to deliver a verdict. We ate in tense silence, each scrape of cutlery loud enough to shatter nerves. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Madeline, we need to settle this nonsense. You've been confused lately." "Confused?" I placed the folder on the table. "Let's clear it up then." Their eyes flickered just briefly before returning to their masks of calm. I opened the folder, sliding the first set of papers across the table. Bank statements, each transaction circled in red. $70,000, I said. "Charged from my account. Unauthorized." My mother smiled faintly. "You're imagining things." I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out the contracts, the forged signatures one after another, laying them out like weapons. "Here's the loan you signed under my name. And here, and here." My father shifted uncomfortably. "These prove nothing." I pressed play on my phone. Her voice filled the room, unmistakable. My mother's laugh, sharp and cruel. "What's 20,000 to you? You'll be fine." The sound seemed to echo against the walls. The room froze. Even Sophia's smirk faltered. "You forged my name, you stole my money, and you laughed about it," I said, my voice low, even. For a moment, the silence was suffocating. Then a voice rose from the corner. My uncle, usually quiet, detached from family drama, stood. His expression was grim. "I heard them talking about it," he said, eyes on me. Your parents. They joked about how easy it was to use your accounts. I didn't want to believe it, but... He shook his head. It's true. The air shifted. The table that had always been their fortress now trembled under the weight of truth. My mother's face drained of color. My father's jaw clenched. Sophia slammed her glass down, shards of wine spraying across the tablecloth. "This is ridiculous!" she screamed. "I don't owe her anything. I don't owe you a single thing." Her voice cracked, shrill, desperate. The mask of elegance slipped, revealing the spoiled cruelty beneath. Cliffhanger moment. I leaned back, letting her words hang heavy in the air, letting everyone see the truth unravel by itself. Chaos erupted. My mother turned on Sophia, hissing that she should have kept quiet. My father barked at them both to sit down, his voice shaking with fury. Sophia shouted over them, accusing them of ruining everything, of never protecting her enough, of using her as a shield. For years, I had been the scapegoat, the one absorbing every wound, every accusation. Now, watching them tear each other apart, I felt none of the usual guilt. Only release. The relatives at the table whispered, shifting uncomfortably, no longer blinded by the illusion of perfection. The Golden family portrait had cracked, and through the cracks spilled rot. I stood, pushing my chair back. The sound cut through their shouting. They turned toward me, 3 pairs of eyes, desperate, furious, pleading all at once. "I'm done," I said simply. My voice didn't shake. "From this day on, I don't belong to this family." "You can't just walk away," my mother shrieked. "I already have." I gathered the folder, tucking the papers back inside, and turned toward the door. Behind me, voices rose again. Shouts, curses, the sound of glass breaking. Their empire was collapsing in real time, a tower of lies crumbling under its own weight. I didn't look back. I walked down the hallway lined with family portraits, each smiling face now grotesque in the dim light. At the door, I paused for just a second, listening to the chaos echo behind me. Then I stepped out into the night. The air was cold, crisp, clean. I closed the door firmly, leaving the screams muffled on the other side. Cliffhanger. The screen of my mind went black, the sound of their voices fading, and for the first time, silence felt like freedom. The weeks after that dinner felt unreal, like the world had shifted on its axis. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the next blow to fall. I had struck first, not with violence, not with cruelty, but with truth. And truth was heavier than any weapon they had ever used against me. The law moved slowly, but it moved. My lawyer filed every document, every statement, every recording. Banks froze accounts that had been fraudulently opened in my name. The luxury assets Sophia had paraded online, her designer bags, her trips, her precious car, all became evidence. When the notice came that her accounts were officially frozen, I almost laughed. I didn't need revenge. Justice was happening all on its own. My parents tried to spin their story, of course. They told neighbors it was all a misunderstanding, that I had turned on them in some hysterical fit. But when the lawyers demanded handwriting samples, when the recordings of my mother's voice played in front of professionals, the mask cracked. They weren't victims anymore. They were culprits. For years, I had believed that if I ever fought back, I'd be destroyed. But now it was them unraveling, not me. Their empire of lies was collapsing, and all I had done was shine a light. One afternoon, I walked out of my lawyer's office with a small envelope in my hand. Inside was a single key, the key to my new apartment. I stood on the sidewalk, holding it in the palm of my hand, staring at it as though it might vanish. My chest ached, but not from grief. From something brighter, sharper. Freedom. Cliffhanger emotion. I clenched the key and whispered to myself, "This is mine. Finally, this is mine." The apartment was modest, smaller than the family house I once thought I'd inherit, but it was mine. Every corner felt like uncharted territory, waiting to be filled not with their voices, but with mine. On my first morning there, I carried a small clay pot onto the balcony. Inside was a sapling I had bought at a nursery on a whim. A fragile thing, its leaves trembling in the breeze. I placed it carefully on the railing, dirt clinging to my fingers. The sun broke through the clouds, spilling over the leaves, warming my skin. I inhaled deeply, air filling my lungs without the weight of fear pressing it back down. For the first time in years, I felt alive, truly alive. This was my pause, my breath between storms, not an ending, but a beginning. Later that week, I met Rebecca again. We laughed over coffee, planned a trip to the coast, talked about work and friends and everything but the family I had left behind. Slowly, piece by piece, I built something new, a chosen family. People who saw me not as an ATM, not as a scapegoat, but as Madeline. Just Madeline. At night, in my quiet apartment, I opened my laptop and wrote, not for my parents, not even for Sophia, but for the people who might one day stumble across my words the way I had stumbled into that survivor group. If you are reading this, I typed, know that you are not alone. They may try to convince you that you're crazy, that you're selfish, that you're the problem, but the problem is not you. The problem is them. And you can walk away. You can rebuild. You can survive. The words came easily, not because the pain had gone, but because it had finally found purpose. My suffering wasn't wasted. It was transformed, recycled into something that could help someone else find their light in the dark. I leaned back, staring at the glow of the screen in the darkened room. My fingers still trembled, but my heart was steady. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It never really had been. This was about rebirth, about proving that freedom was the sweetest victory of all. Somewhere across town, my parents were likely still scrambling, Sophia still fuming, but their chaos no longer reached me. Their voices no longer echoed in my head. I closed my laptop, walked onto the balcony, and touched the sapling's leaves gently. They rustled in the evening breeze, fragile yet unyielding, much like me. The city lights stretched out before me, glowing like a map of endless possibilities. And for the first time, I didn't feel trapped in their story. I was writing my own,